Okay, welcome. Thank you guys for sharing your evening with me. I'm going to share my screen here and then we will begin our talk. Okay, welcome. My name is Dr. Dieter. I'm a board certified internist and a board certified pediatrician. And thank you again for sharing your evening with us. What I want to do today is to go through how the chronic medical conditions that we face today are due to what we call a metabolic dysfunction. Metabolic dysfunction actually is just simply a fancy medical term to say energy shortage. So most of our today's medical issues are coming from an energy shortage. And that energy shortage in itself is coming from two entities. One entity called insulin resistance and the other entity called microbiome dysfunction. These two entities result in metabolic dysfunction, the shortage of energy. That shortage of energy then drives all the chronic diseases that we face today. So you could actually link insulin resistance directly to the chronic conditions we face today, as well as microbiome dysfunction. I'm going to dissect these two things and try to explain what they mean. So, uh, evidence now, there is now strong scientific evidence that most of our modern day diseases as a result of these two entities. I want to single out these two entities and talk about them and show you how they feed into all our modern day diseases. And let's start with insulin resistance. What is insulin resistance? It's just simply a fancy medical term to say that your insulin is not working well. That's it. And insulin is a very critical hormone in the body. In fact, insulin, I call insulin the CEO of the body because insulin is the most important hormone in our existence. It helps to dictate the smooth functioning and structure of the body. When insulin is running well, things run smoothly in the body. So it's the CEO of the body. It is hormone numero uno in terms of importante. No hormone trumps insulin. And you may ask me, Doc, why are you elevating insulin to that high of a status? This is the reason why. Because insulin has a very important job. The job of insulin is to do this, to mobilize glucose out of the blood into the cell. You see, when we eat, the end product of absorption is the release of glucose into the blood. That glucose that is released into the blood is going to be moved into the cell, okay? And the job of insulin is to move that glucose into the cell. When the glucose is moved into the cell, there is a special organelle in the cell here called the mitochondria. The mitochondria you may remember in your junior biology classes to be considered to be the powerhouse of the cell. It's the energy engine of the cell. Now, in the mitochondria, the glucose goes through a complex series of reactions called the electron transport chain with the result of an energy molecule called ATP, which stands for adenosine triphosphate. It's simply just an energy molecule. Now, every cell in the body requires energy to function. The simplest entity of the body is a cell. Cells group up to form tissues. Tissues group up to form organs. Organ system. System forms the whole man. But the smallest entity is a cell. And every cell in the body requires energy to function. When the cell doesn't have the energy that it needs to function, the cell malfunctions. The simplest definition of a disease is a group of cells, tissues, organs, or system that has malfunctioned. So, why then is insulin so important? Why do I elevate insulin and call it the CEO of the body? It's because insulin is central to producing energy. Without energy, the cell doesn't function well and you have diseases. So when we say that you have insulin resistance, we're saying that your insulin is not working well. We're saying that there is a breakdown in this process of insulin mobilizing glucose out of the cell, out of the blood, into the cell so that energy could be produced. Now you have to ask, how do you have a breakdown? Because once upon a time ago, God created our insulin to be working just well. So, how do you go from a normal working insulin to insulin resistance? If my car breaks down and I take it to the mechanic, the first thing the mechanic does is to run a diagnostic to find out why my car broke down. Because once he figures out why my car broke down, he could now work backwards to get a fix. So I want you guys to understand, how do we come about developing insulin resistance? It happens in two ways. First, something we call chronic overnutrition, resulting in too much fat. Okay, too much fat. Chronic overnutrition just simply means we're consuming way more calories today than we're supposed to be consuming. And the cell or the body knows the quantity of calories that it needs to function. So today there's an overabundance of food and an overabundance of bad calories, and we're taking in too much. So what happens when you consume more calories than the body needs? This is a cell. This is a way the normal cell is supposed to use. If I take in more calories than my body needs, the body is going to take all that excess calories and convert that excess calorie into fat. The body usually doesn't know what to do with all that fat. The body decides that it's gonna take that fat and lump it into this cell. I'm drawing a replica of the cell. So now the body takes the fat, which comes from the conversion of extra calories, and lumps that fat into the cell. And this cell now becomes an abnormal cell, like what I call a fat-laden cell. And that's not good. Why? Because the job of insulin is to move glucose into the cell. Now, this cell, which is a normal cell, when insulin knocks at the door of this cell, the cell can easily open its doors for insulin. You now have this cell that is fat laden. When insulin comes and knocks on the door of this cell, knock, knock, I got glucose in the blood. I need you to take it up, run it through the electron transport chain so that the cell can have energy to function. And this cell tells insulin, what, are you crazy? I have no room in this inn. I am filled with fat. If I were to bring glucose in, glucose will have no place to lay its head. I'm sorry, the innkeeper says. I can't bring glucose in. So glucose cannot enter the cell. So you have a breakdown in the normal process that you're supposed to have. That's the first way in which you develop insulin resistance. Now, what happens is that the glucose that cannot enter the cell now begins to accumulate in the blood, okay? And what happens is there is a one-to-one relationship between the concentration of glucose and the amount of insulin produced by the pancreas. The pancreas is the gland that produces insulin. So when glucose levels go up, a message is sent to the pancreas to tell the pancreas, hey, you need to produce too much insulin to bring the glucose down. And too much insulin is no bueno, it's no good. Why? Because too much insulin is acts as a bully and a tyrant to the cell. Remember how I described insulin as hormone numero uno, as being the CEO of the body that dictates the smooth structure and functioning of the body. Imagine having a CEO of a very important company that has been running the company smoothly. And one day that CEO comes to work, he has lost it. He has gone crazy. He starts backing out orders of people, comes to your desk, yelling at you, embarrassing you, say you're going to do it my way or the highway, asking unreasonable demands to his employees, firing people for no just reason. What happens is that CEO who was respected and running the company smoothly what happens is that all of a sudden, with him having that tyrannical behavior, being a bully, his employees lose their respect for him. And when the employees lose their respect, they become reluctant to do what the boss asks them to do. If you have a superior who you do not respect, a boss who you do not respect, it's hard for you to do what the boss asks you to do with all your heart. You translate that to the cell. When insulin is running too much, insulin is acting as a bully and a tyrant to the cell. It's yelling at the cell, it's having a very high tone to the cell. The cell doesn't take kindly to that high tone bullying mentality of insulin. So the cell loses its respect for insulin. Now, when the cell loses its respect for insulin, the cell becomes reluctant to do what insulin asks the cell to do. What's the number one thing that insulin asks the cell to do? Hey, cell, open your doors this wide so that I can let glucose in. The cell has now lost its respect for insulin because insulin is a bully. So when insulin commands the cell to open your door this wide, out of reluctance, the cell opens its doors this wide. When the cell opens its doors this wide, what happens is that less glucose enters the cell than if the door was wider. So that results in the accumulation of more glucose in the blood. That accumulation of more glucose in the blood causes things to go from the situation to go from fry pan to fire. The insulin becomes the pancreas now has to produce even more insulin, because remember, there is a one-to-one relationship between glucose rise and insulin production. So when the pancreas now produces even more insulin, we're looking at a boss who was crazy at this level and raises his craziness level to this level, becomes even more of a tyrant and becomes even more of a bully. When that happens, the cells lose even more respect for the for insulin. When the cell loses even more respect for insulin, what happens is that more and more the cell goes from having its doors initially when the cell had lost respect for insulin. When insulin commanded the cell to open its doors this wide, the cell kept its doors this wide. When the cell loses even more respect for insulin because insulin is bullying the cell even more, it goes from having its doors this wide to this wide. So that causes a vicious cycle. So these two things, too much fat and too much insulin, result in insulin not working well. Now, when your insulin is not working well, we say you have insulin resistance, it results in a deficiency of energy that now drives these disease processes. And this slide here is only a depiction, it's not exhaustive of all the modern day diseases that come as a result of insulin resistance. I want to stress. I don't want you guys to listen to this and think about insulin resistance as diabetes. No, diabetes is only just one of the bad guys that comes as a result of insulin resistance. Insulin resistance, when you think about insulin resistance, it's not just diabetes. It is the reason why people have high blood pressure. It is the reason why people have heart disease. The reason why people have fatty liver disease, Alzheimer's disease, migraines, cancers. Let me just give you a link between insulin resistance and high blood pressure. When you're insulin resistant, your insulin is not working well. What happens is that your body cannot make enough energy. Now, we generate our blood pressure from the arteries. Your artery looks like this. Inside the artery is a special cell in the artery called the endothelial cell. The job of the endothelial cell is to produce a special signaling molecule called nitric oxide. The job of nitric oxide is to go to the wall of this artery and push the walls of the artery out, like elbow out. When it pushes the walls of the artery out, the diameter of the artery increases, to a wider diameter. And when the diameter is wider, you have a lower blood pressure in here. Nitric oxide exerting its effects on the wall to cause this to push out. Now, remember that I said that every cell needs energy to function? This endothelial cell that produces nitric oxide, guess what it needs? It needs ATP to be able to produce nitric oxide. So when you have insulin resistance and you have a deficiency of energy because glucose is not being taken up by the mitochondria to produce ATP, you now have a deficiency of ATP, energy. That deficiency of ATP results in insufficient nitric oxide or little to no nitric oxide produced. And if the job of nitric oxide is to go to the walls of the cell of the arteries and push it out to be wider, when you have no nitric oxide, instead of you having a scenario like this where the diameter of the artery is wide, you now have a scenario like this where the diameter of the artery is not that wide. In this artery, you're going to have a higher blood pressure. So for the interest of time, I wanted to just touch on one of this, for you to see the link. For the interest of time, I cannot go through all of these diseases on this slide to show you how they are linked. But if you understand that every cell requires energy to function, then you could understand that the deficiency of energy caused by insulin resistance can then lead to disease states. Let me talk a little bit about obesity. I say that quickly. You see, insulin is a good hormone, and insulin can be a bad hormone. It was meant to be a good hormone, right? Normally, when your insulin levels are running high, when insulin has become that tyrannical boss, what it does is that it locks up fat in the gel cell. And that looks like this. That looks like this. That causes obesity. That causes people to be overweight. When your insulin is high, it acts as a jailer, locks fat up on the jail cell, because insulin is what we call an anabolic hormone, causes things to grow, causes things to be stored. Fat is stored, locked up. When insulin is low, because when you have insulin resistance, like I mentioned, you'll be producing too much insulin to compensate for the glucose. When insulin levels drop, the opposite will happen. You will be able to now release fat from the jail cell. You lose weight. When you're insulin resistant, you will be overweight or obese. Let's talk about the second entity, dysbiosis or microbiome dysfunction. Remember I said this in this slide that was one of the entities that results in our chronic diseases. To understand what microbiome dysfunction is, it's important to understand what the microbiome is. It is a group of about it's a group of uh, um, about 10 to 30 trillion organisms, bacteria that live in the gut. These bacteria that live in the gut, about 10 to 30 trillion bacteria that live in the gut, they're called the microbiome. These are the bacteria here. They play a very important role. When God created you and I, He created these bacteria to live in what we call a symbiotic relationship with us. We scratch their back, they scratch us. We, as their host, are supposed to provide them shelter and food, and they're supposed to provide certain functions for us. I want to highlight two functions that they do, two important functions. One, they help to protect the gut from pathogenic bacteria, a fancy term to say disease-causing bacteria. They do so by producing a special molecule called a short-chain fatty acid. Now, The short chain fatty acids then helps to protect the gut. How does that happen? The cells of the gut are lined together one after another like this. Think about one cell and another cell lined together to make the gut wall. So think about multiple cells, cell to cell, forming the colon wall. Now, the area where one cell meets the other cell, this area right here is called the tight junction. It's an area of vulnerability, an area of weakness in the integrity of the wall. So what these short chain fatty acids do is they act as a sealant. They come and pour concrete or cement on this area to beef up the security here to improve the strength. And these short chain fatty acids can only be produced by the biological activity of this organism. So that's how they help when the integrity of the wall is tight, stuff cannot seep through. But when there is weakness in the wall, that weakness in the wall can now cause bacteria and undigested food, toxins, to leak into the blood, causing infections or chronic inflammation. The other thing I want to highlight is that these organisms play a very pivotal role in training and regulating the immune system. You may not know it, but 70% of the body's immune system resides in your gut. The other 30% resides in the bone marrow, the lymph nodes, the lymphatics. And the microbiome is responsible for training the immune system on how to respond. It gives the immune system a training on this is what you should recognize as a threat. This is what is not a threat. And for what it recognizes as a threat, it gives an adequate prescription of what kind of force to use against that. It's like this. I give you an example. It's like this. When the microbiome, when these organisms are healthy and doing the job they're supposed to do, if it sees a bacteria, it trains the immune system and tells the immune system, do you see that bacteria right there? That bacteria right there is a bad bacteria. But you know what? We can kill him with just a simple stone. Even though he's a bad guy and could cause us problems, he's a weak enemy. If we just took a stone and threw at him, you're gonna take him out. So the other thing it does is you don't need any heavy firepower to do that. The other thing when the microbiome is healthy is it sees another guy. It tells the immune system, do you see that guy right there? And the immune system is struggling to see the guy that the microbiome is saying. It says, well, no, I can't see the guy you're talking about. And the immune system says, the reason you cannot see that guy is that that guy right there, he's in camouflage. Look well. And the immune system says, yes, I see him, he's in camouflage. And the microbiome tells the immune system, be careful with that guy. He may look like the enemy, but he's not the enemy. He's just in camouflage. He's not the enemy. Please do not fire any bullets at him. He's one of us. So just be careful with him. So that's what a healthy microbiome does in its instruction to the immune system that resides in our gut. Now, when the microbiome is not healthy, it radicalizes the immune system to attack, attack, attack. It radicalizes the immune system to be hot-tempered, to be ready to pick a fight, to have its hand ready on the trigger all the time. And this is how, and to have an exaggerated response, making a mountain out of an anthill. It may look like this. It sees a bacteria, that simple bacteria that could have been killed with a stone, and it tells the immune system, that bacteria is a bad guy, but and we could kill that bacteria with a stone, but he's a bad guy. He deserves to die. Why use a stone? Let's make a big splash. Let's drop a grenade in his backyard. So a bacteria that could have been killed with a simple stone the microbiome is radicalizing the immune system to say, drop a grenade in the backyard. If you use a stone, a precision weapon, as opposed to using a grenade, when a grenade goes off in that backyard, there's huge collateral damage that affects the other cells. But that's what the microbiome does to radicalize the immune system. So an overkill that hurts the body. Then the other thing it does, it sees the guy in camouflage and tells the immune system, you know what? I don't got time to decide whether this guy in camouflage is the enemy or not the enemy. Let's just take him out. We're in the heat of the battle. I don't have time to decipher. Take him out. And and the microbiome tells the immune system, let's take him out. We'll take him to the autopsy table later. If it ends up that I'm right and he's the enemy, good for me. I did a good job. But if it turns out that I'm wrong and he's not the enemy, well, oh well, I was trying to defend our territory, our turf. And that's how autoimmune diseases come into place. When your microbiome has radicalized your immune system that resides in your gut to begin to attack you. And when that happens, we say you have dysbiosis. Now, what then is dysbiosis? Dysbiosis is when there is an imbalance in the microbial population in the gut. You see, about 50% of the bacteria in the gut are what we call bad bacteria, and the other 50% are what we call good bacteria. They check and balance each other out. When we say you have microbiome dysfunction of dysbiosis, what happens is there's an imbalance in that population. The bad bacteria increase and the good bacteria decrease. And that imbalance comes as a result of food, the shortage of food. You see, the food for the microbiome is fiber. When there isn't enough food for the good and the bad, survival of the fittest sets in. The bad bacteria are the stronger bacteria. Because they're stronger, they're going to hoard the little food that is there. And then after hoarding that little food, they say to themselves, there is not enough food to go for us and the good guys. Why don't we increase our army so we could keep a monopoly on the little food that is there? And that's what happens. And it results in a rise at the expense of a decrease in that. The food for the microbiome, as I said, is fiber. We're not consuming enough fiber in today's day and age. Our foods are so rich of fiber. Our ancestors consumed about 80 to 90 grams of fiber every day. A man is supposed to consume about 38 grams of fiber. A woman should be consuming about 25 grams of fiber. In the United States, the NIH estimates that the average man and woman is consuming 10 to 12 grams of fiber. So when you have that imbalance in the bacterial population, we say you have dysbiosis. And when you have dysbiosis, these are the diseases that come into play. A lot of autoimmune diseases are on here. It's the microbiome that has radicalized the immune system, to attack the body cell. Multiple sclerosis, autoimmune disease. Hashimoto's, autoimmune disease. Lupus, autoimmune disease. Many celiac, autoimmune disease. And this slide again is not exhaustive of all the issues that arise because of dysbiosis. Type 2 diabetes, cancers, irritable bowel syndrome, what have you, come from that. One thing I also want to highlight, which was very surprising to me when I learned about this 3 years ago, is what we call the brain-gut axis. How the gut is responsible for our mental health. And that blew my mind. When I learned that anxiety and depression as a result of dysbiosis, I was like, oh my goodness, it makes sense. And I want you guys to understand why that is the link. You see, the hormones serotonin and dopamine, which are hormones that are supposed to maintain our mood. Serotonin, which is the mood hormone, mood and happiness hormone, 90% of that hormone is produced in the gut. The other 10% of that hormone is produced in the central nervous system. So when the gut is unhealthy and you have dysbiosis, it's like a factory that cannot work. When this factory cannot work, 90% is gone. Anxiety and depression. Today, our foods are so processed. The number of people with mental health illnesses, anxiety, depression, is astronomical because of that. Now, I tell you guys something. These diseases, our ancestors never had these diseases. If I gave you a time machine to go back 100 years, 200 years, and find me anybody with diabetes and report back, you're going to come back and say, Doc, I never found a single person with diabetes. I never found a single person with Hashimoto's. But because of the way we live today, the overconsumption of the overconsumption of calories that result in insulin resistance, and the deprivation of consumption of fiber, food so processed. Now, this slide here called the metabolic sequence of inflammation that shows that insulin resistance causes energy shortage that causes injury to the cell. When a cell is injured, it turns on the inflammatory system, the immune, it turns on the immune system to protect it. Now, what happens is when the immune system is turned on, it comes to the cell to protect it. And when it comes to this cell, it finds smoke here. The fire started 2 houses away at insulin resistance and dysbiosis. So that immune response is not able to resolve the problem. And what happens? That immune response results in more injury in the cell. That injured cell cries out again to the immune system. The immune system deploys another inflammatory response, whereas this chronic problem is continuing to cause inflammation. So you're having a double whammy inflammation. The first inflammation just coming from this natural process. And the second inflammation coming because of the failed immune system response, resulting in a further cry to the immune system. You now have chronic inflammation that is at the heart of a lot of the symptoms that we have with our diseases. All this may sound bleak, but there is good news. I told you that our ancestors did not have these diseases 100 years ago, 200 years ago. Why? There is now science that shows that these two core things that are the root of the evil, are the root of our modern day diseases. If you were to reverse those things that deprive the body of its natural biology, the disease conditions will go away. These two things cause a deficiency in energy. If you restore that energy deficiency, the diseases disappear. If you're driving a car and the car runs out of gas, that car stops because, it has run out of its energy source, not because of a failure, intrinsic failure of the engine. If you were to walk to a gas station, buy gas, and go back to your car on the side of the road and put gas back into it, energy back into it, when you sit back in the driver's seat to turn on the key to start the car, never once are you going to be paranoid. Oh, I hope this car starts. I've run out of gas 2 times, as embarrassing as it can be. I have never once, after refilling my tank, been worried if the car will start. It is so simple but so profound. So it is with the body. When you restore the energy that came as a result, the energy loss that came as a result of this, those diseases disappear. And I want to show you guys a solution called the Feel Great system. And this solution uses two things. It uses the science of intermittent fasting and fiber supplementation to reverse insulin resistance and dysbiosis. If you reverse these two things, those disease conditions go poof. And these two products are what we call nutraceuticals. A nutraceutical is a product made 100% from plants but has huge therapeutic benefits. And I want to show you how both of them work to achieve this goal, reversing the root cause. The first product in this is what we call Unimate, made from a plant native to South America called the yerba mate plant. And this plant is very rich in a special phytonutrient called chlorogenic acid. Now, chlorogenic acid has a special property called lipolysis. Okay. The other thing that chlorogenic acid has is a special property to induce the body to make its own GLP-1s. Remember, we're going to be using the science. We eat too much, guys. We're eating way more than we're supposed to eat. In this day and age, they say we're consuming about 30 to 35% more calories than our ancestors did. That's the cause of our illnesses. If we went back 100 years ago, our ancestors maybe ate, if I'm being liberal, 2 meals a day. You know, some people say our ancestors ate about 3 to 5 times a week. Today, if I were to say we're eating 3 meals a day, I'll be underestimating, because we graze. We eat 3 meals, we're eating, snacking all through. So we're trying to use the science of intermittent fasting and fiber supplementation to reverse these two things. So what the Unimate does is the Unimate chlorogenic acid has two properties: induces lipolysis, which is a fancy medical term to just mean fat burning. And the other thing it does is that it helps the body to produce GLP-1. So when you take, how does that now help in reversing insulin resistance? When you take the Unimate, two things. It's going to cause you to fast. When you are fasting, let's see if I could when you are fasting, what happens is, I'm going to use another page here. Let me use this page. When you are fasting, what happens is that your body has to switch from fat storage mode to fat burning mode. Fasting is a very important tool to reverse insulin resistance. Very important tool. So the GLP-1 inducing property of this, if you've heard of GLP-1, is a hormone that helps you not to feel hungry. It causes, when you consume the Unimate, it causes you to be able to go through a period without eating and not feeling hungry. Okay. Now, when you start fasting, what happens is this. We have two sources of energy. We have glucose and we have fat. Fat is like the body's savings account, and glucose is like the body's checkings account. In periods of plenty, we're going to spend out of our checkings account. When things become tough, we spend out of our savings account. So when you're fasting, what happens is that the body's glucose levels go low. Your checkings accounts go low. When your checking account goes low, your body needs a source of energy. These are two sources of energy: glucose, fat. You know, your body is now going to switch to fat burning. It's going to switch to depending on a savings account so that metabolic processes can continue to go on. When you're in a hardship, you still need to pay your mortgage. You know, so you will switch to your savings. So what happens when you consume the Unimate? It causes you to be able to fast. We want you to fast for a period of at least 16 hours, because when you're fasting, it brings down your insulin levels. When it brings down your insulin levels, or it causes you to fast, it forces your body to switch from its checkings account to its savings account to burn fat. Now, how's that important? Remember, you developed insulin resistance because this cell was filled with fat. Now that the body has switched to its savings account, it starts burning fat. When it starts burning fat, so that metabolic processes continue to go on, this cell that was fat laden now becomes like this. That's one advantage of the Unamate having a GLP-1 property helping you to be able to fast. The other thing is that it has an intrinsic property of fat burning. So it's coming to this cell. This product helps this cell, which is fat laden, to also burn the fat. So you're having two ways in which you're getting rid of this fat and getting to this process. When this cell now looks like this, all the glucose that could not enter the cell now can be able to enter that cell. When it enters the cell, it can now go through the electron transport chain to make energy. You restore the energy. Remember, a disease is a group of cells, tissues, organs, or system that has malfunctioned because of energy. You now have glucose get into the cell. It can now make energy. You're restoring the energy deficit. That's the first way in which the Unamate does that. Now, because it does that, it helps to take care of this problem of too much fat, because this cell now looks like this. Now that this cell looks like that, the second problem when your insulin was not working well was insulin being too much, acting as a bully. Now, all of this insulin that was high was as a result of this glucose in the cell, a glucose in the blood. When this cell now goes back to looking like this, and all the glucose that had accumulated in the blood enters the cell, the concentration of glucose in the blood drops. When the concentration of glucose in the blood drops, a message is sent to the pancreas. We no longer need you to produce that high amount of
You let
insulin.
me see it.
We no longer need you to produce that high amount of insulin. Bring insulin down low. Insulin that comes low is like that boss that was crazy that returns back to earth. He comes to his employees, he comes to work one day and calls an in service, tells his employees, listen, I know I've been a jerk for the last 2 months. I am so sorry. I acted unreasonably. I said some things that I should not have said, and this and that. I fired some of you guys for no good reason. I am sorry. The employees are touched by that humility. They forgive their boss. After forgiving their boss, they regain their respect. When the boss says jump, they say, boss man, how high? They're ready to go to battle for the boss. You translate that to the cell. When insulin is now running low, the cell now says, you know what? I can deal with that insulin guy now that he has calmed down. I like that lower tone. Is the cell is coming to insulin, and insulin is coming to the cell and saying, I'm sorry. The cell is very forgiving, just like kids on the playground are forgiving to a bully, that the bully comes and says, please, sorry I bullied you. The cell forgives insulin when insulin lowers its tone. Uh, and now when insulin tells the cell, open your doors this wide so that I can let glucose in, the cell says, I'll be happy to. It does so. Glucose flows in, more energy. You have reversed this process and reversed this process. And that's what the Unamate does. You are using the science of intermittent fasting, to be able to reverse insulin resistance. The fiber does exactly the same thing by promoting lipolysis, fat burning. So fiber causes this cell to burn fat to become like this cell, and causes what you see on the screen, the whole reversal. The other thing that fiber does is that fiber helps to decrease your glycemic index. It decreases the spike in your glucose, which means that you're not going to produce as much insulin. And why is that important? Let me give you an example of the implications of that. When I say fiber decreases your glycemic index, the balanced product is actually made of fiber. This balanced product is made up of a blend of 7 different fibers taken in. When you consume fiber, it slows the transit of food through the colon. When food's transit through the colon is slowed, there's a slow release of glucose into the blood. The implications are this. If you and I went to an Italian restaurant to eat lasagna and you consume your lasagna without fiber, that's you. Your blood sugar is going to do this, okay? And that peak in your blood sugar may be a blood sugar of 170. For me, I know a thing or two about fiber. I know this product is very rich in fiber. I consume the balanced product and I eat exactly the same plate of lasagna that you had. My exact quantity, my blood sugar is going to do this. And that a peak of my blood sugar may be a blood sugar of 80. You're not eating the same plate of lasagna, but your blood sugar has gone up to 170, mine 180. The implications of that is that your pancreas is going to have to produce a commensurate higher amount of insulin to deal with that, maybe 20 units for you. For me, my pancreas will produce a commensurate lower amount of insulin to deal with that sugar of 80. Now, remember, when your insulin is too high, it's like the crazy CEO that the employees do not respect. When your insulin is low, it's like that humble CEO. And that's it. Very important. Last thing is that insulin is an anabolic hormone, it stores calories. From this plate of lasagna, because you produce 20 units of insulin, you may gain 950 calories. From this same plate of lasagna, that I ate exact quantity, but because I produce a low amount of insulin, I may only gain 300 calories. Why is that important? That is important because you remember excess calories are converted into fat. That fat is now lumped into the cell and results in the first stage of insulin resistance. That's the implication of fiber. And by so doing, by fiber causing you to have this profile, it pushes you towards what we call insulin sensitivity. And that's how it plays a huge role in reversing insulin resistance. The last thing I'll say is that fiber is food for the microbiome. Food for the microbiome. That's how it reverses dysbiosis. Remember, I said we're not consuming enough fiber, and that's why we have dysbiosis 10 to 12, whereas we're supposed to be an average here. Every living organism, whether it's a bacteria in the gut or a lion in the jungle of Cameroon, where I'm from, every living organism needs food. And the food for these organisms is fiber. So just by giving them chow, right? When you give them chow, there'll be enough food for the good guys and the bad guys. There's no need to fight. And it keeps the balance of that. So I will end by saying that the science is now overwhelming that our modern day diseases come as a result of these two things. And the science is equally overwhelming that the reversal of the root cause, insulin resistance and dysbiosis, result in restoration of the energy deficit that causes reversal of disease. So let that be hope to you that if you suffer from any chronic medical condition that is the result of dysbiosis and or insulin resistance, that you can reclaim your health again. Thank you. I'm going to stop sharing my screen and I'm going to yield to my moderators. Thank you.
Great. Thanks so much for that going through that. That is so helpful. And there's a lot of comments about Dr. Dieter makes this so simple to understand. So thanks for that. Yeah, person. All right. So what I'm going to do, Dr. Dieter, is I'm going to show some proof, people who have used this system, what it looks like. We're going to hear live from Keith, who's on, who was able to relieve himself from a foot ulcer. So here's a picture of Dr. Dieter that I want to share with you. This is the speaker today. This was him coming to the US eating our standard American diet with a lot of carbohydrates. And then he discovered intermittent fasting. So this is 5 years of Dr. Dieter intermittent fasting. And from here to here, this is just 2.5 months using the Feel Great system that he just talked about. This is what a significant change you can see. I'm also going to call on Dr. Kinney to speak a little bit in a minute. So 35 days apart, he'd been very sick in the hospital for 4 months in the hospital because of insulin resistance. And here he was 35 days using this system. This is how significant your body can change. 60 days for Kimberly. You see the inflammation gone in her face. And this is Angelita. If you saw her, if you ran into her, she looks thin. She did not look like she was heavy, but what she was struggling with was anxiety and depression. She's a nurse practitioner in Texas and really struggled. She was constantly filling a prescription for anxiety. And after she used this system, you can see that her body transformed. But for her, it was more of the mental aspect, that anxiety level going down, depression normalizing. This is Dr. Marla. She's a colleague of mine. I used to work with her, an engineer, when I was working in engineering. When this picture was taken, and you might understand this because you have a mother who is having trouble walking. She needed a cane to walk around on this cruise that she was on. When I asked her to try this product, see if it would help, she was struggling from long COVID, had days where she could not get out of bed. She was bedridden, feeling terrible. 3.5 months, she got rid of the brain fog, normalized her blood work, and no longer needs a cane to walk around. It was very significant. So you get that inflammation down. This is Jonathan. Jonathan is a retired NFL football player. He had lost 50 pounds in 50 days on the system, went on to lose more. But for him, he had psoriasis all over the back of his head, all over his arms, and nothing really worked. He had this since he was a teenager. And when he started using the system, within 50 days, there was no more sign of psoriasis on his body either. This is Claudia. She also, this is what her psoriasis, she actually had a picture of her skin issues. And this is resolution. This took a couple months. She added some omega-3s to it and was able to clear up her skin for the first time in her life since she was a teenager. She struggled with these skin issues related to insulin resistance, but she had no idea. She went to doctors and told them about what was going on. They saw her, but they didn't know that if you made someone insulin sensitive, their skin would clear up. We see significant weight loss with this system with no side effects. Someone takes Ozempic, maybe they're paying $500 a month. They get gastroparesis, they feel terrible, they have possible permanent issues with those injections. Here, no, zero side effects. It's just plants, and you can see someone has to go shopping for new clothes. When Cody lost a significant amount of weight, this is about 50 pounds in 5 months. He doesn't have hanging skin from that. When you lose weight like that, autophagy will just eat this extra cells. This is my friend Jimmy was also able to get rid of his diabetes, A1C down to a normal range and off of all of his meds. He was on max dose of metformin. He was on max dose of all of these diabetes meds and still wasn't even touching it. And here, a couple months on the system, he's off all of his meds. He got his mother-in-law, his mother, and his wife off of her pre-diabetes meds. We see that dropping the A1C, this is Roe, and this is my friend. He's 81 years old on diabetes meds, and he was able to go from this to this using the system. Now he runs circles around people his age. He's completely mobile. And Keith, we're going to have Keith share his story in just a minute, but he's 54 years old, 20 years as a type 2 diabetic. And then he found this system and was able to reverse it. So I'm going to let Keith talk. And Keith, I'm going to jump. I like to warn people. I'm going to show you a foot ulcer. So this is a type 2 diabetes foot ulcer. And Keith is going to share a little bit of this story. But rather than interrupting him, let me show you this picture. This is under treatment. So this is with all the he's working with all the doctors. He had a primary care, he had a foot doctor, he had an endocrinologist, an eye doctor. All these people are working with him, and he still came up with a diabetes foot ulcer because no one told him the connection between what he had going on and what he was doing. No one told him to reduce his carbohydrate intake and to make some lifestyle modifications until the Feel Great system made it so simple for him. This right here is a picture of after $180,000 of treatment in a hyperbaric chamber, and then only got him this close. And then this is 3.5 months on the Feel Great system. Now he has a pulse in his foot. They can feel a pulse now, and they're actually able to see him rejuvenated. So Keith, I'm going to put you on spotlight and have you unmute if that's okay. So I just want to show the 216 people here. Keith is just Keith, you're just a regular real person, and you saw the system on social media. you started using it. Tell us your story when you started.
When I started, I was pretty much in a pretty bad situation medically. I mean, I was type 2 diabetic for 25 years on insulin almost that entire time. I was up to 15 meds a day, 6 injections a day. I was getting injections in my eyes to try and stop the bleeding in my retinas. And so yeah, when I passed away last June of that foot wound, or last January, it's almost been a year now. Um, I kind of my daughter was finding out that she was having my first grandson, and that's when I made it my mission to get healthier. And I stumbled across this actually on TikTok, and I saw Dr. Kenny, and I literally went, "That's my guy. He's gonna, I'm gonna work with him." And I started the protocol, and on day one, energy was through the roof. I had so much energy, I didn't even know what to do with it all. Day two, I was off 108 units of insulin a day. Within the first 2 months, I was down like 55, 60 pounds. I had lost 8 or 9 inches on my waist. I was off 14 of those 15 medications, all doctor confirmed, and blood work. And by day 90, my A1C had dropped from 7.5 to 5.4. I was off all 15 medication. I wasn't taking any insulin. My eye doctor had said he hadn't seen my eyes look this good in over 4 years. It's actually improved. My foot doctor is amazed. I just saw him a couple weeks ago, and he was literally stunned at how far I've come. My cardiologist is looking at it. My primary care, everybody I care, is trying the protocol, and it has truly saved my life. I mean, when I came out of the hospital, I couldn't walk, and I mentioned this earlier. I was in Jacksonville over the past couple days, and we went for a walk, and 7 months ago I couldn't have done it. I would have barely made it from the restaurant to the car, and I would have had to stop. And we went for a good half an hour walk, and I haven't been able to do that in a long time. And it really showed me how far I'd come. Um, I mean, I got a plastic tote full of meds and diabetic stuff
Yeah.
that I no longer need.
I need to get that picture sitting next to the picture of your foot because that is an amazing picture. I'm gonna add that so it's right there to see how much med literally baskets of meds that you were taking every day. Your life was going to doctors. I mean, that was basically what you're doing. You're on
That
the
was my social
literally.
calendar, yeah.
So and now what have you done? What have you done now that you have to find new things to do in your life?
I've been back in the gym, which I haven't done in over 30 years. Um, I'm traveling. I got to spend a weekend with what I consider a good friend of mine, a couple of good friends of mine actually, doing some training, and just it it has opened up a whole new world for me. I've got hope for the future now versus just waiting to die.
I love it. I love it. It's so powerful. Well, thank you. Thank you so much. I appreciate that. And there's a lot of love going on in the comments, people saying like, yep, changed my life too. Yeah, Chopper got to meet you in person. Um, and,
Yeah.
and it's like, he's just a regular guy. He's a real guy. I have Julius on. I think I have the right one highlighted. If I do, can you put your camera on and I'll um, see if I got you here. If not, while I figure that out, I will have Dr.
I'm trying to get the camera on.
Love it. This is
Why
your
do I picture this
Mhm.
I don't know.
Well,
Right.
in person,
In
it looks different. It looks
animation.
different than the, yeah, than there. Let me let you guys work on that for a second. I'm going to grab Dr. Tiffany real quick and I'm going to add her to the spotlight and let you tell your story. Dr. Tiffany, also a physician here, medical doctor, double board certified. Tell me a little bit about your story. High blood pressure was able to make a significant change. And then why would you do this? Why would you join us? Why would you leave your practice as a physician to join us in this mission?
Yeah, I mean, just like it sounds, I am just crazy enough to believe that these stories are true. You hear them and you're like, that can't be real. His foot didn't look like that. Keith didn't look like that. But, when I did see Keith, it was like, who is this person? That is not who I expected to see. But when you get those types of real stories, and I did not see that practicing medicine for 20 years, it became a no-brainer. One, I started using the products for myself. And I actually was able to get off of my blood pressure medicine, help with my waist get smaller. I was able to get off of some antidepressants, things that I was taking. I was trying to really talk about lifestyle medicine. That's about going after the root causes of conditions, but I didn't really have a good tool to transition patients to do those changes. And it became, do these changes. And 3 months later, they were like, oh my goodness, I fell off. I had a birthday party. I fell off the wagon, and all their things that they did well, they lost them. And so having these tools to allow people to be consistent made everything. Yep, just crazy enough to be here with Dr. Dieter, Dr. Kenny, anybody who understands and grabs the mission to see what we're doing. We're actually helping people get their lives back. Who doesn't want to do that?
That is absolutely true. And, when I got a chance to meet Dr. Tiffany's a regular person. I got to meet Dr. Tiffany's mother, and she struggles with MS. She had been almost like dragging her foot for some time. She started using the system just like Julius. Hopefully we get to hear a story. Started using the system, and she then was going to church in heels for the first time in a long time. You would never know. You would never know that a couple months earlier she was dragging her foot from MS. You had no idea. So that was amazing seeing that in real life. So, Dr. Tiffany, I don't know if you've met Julius yet or not, but I'm going to have him share his story as well. Quite powerful. And thank you so much. Yeah, thanks so much for being on too. So, Julius, you're here. I love also your story, but tell me a little bit about how you came into this. I cannot get enough of the carpet cleaner story, if you mind sharing again.
Yeah, no problem. Hello, everybody. Julius Ade here. Yes, so as I have mentioned before, my wife had tried to introduce me to these products maybe 3 months ago, and I ignored. I don't love medication, so I thought it was some kind of medicine, so I ignored it. But it so happened that I had quite a few friends who fell ill over the past year. Some of them cancer, cardiac issues, renal failure, and that concern really got me worried about life, right? That what were we up to? Are we just supposed to sit here and wait for our turn for something bad to happen to us? Oh, can you guys see me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh,
Super clear.
sorry
Yeah, you're
about
fine.
that. Yes. So then I came home after visiting one of my friends who was sick. And it so happened that a guy came here to clean our carpet at home. He's in his late 60s, and he saw the box sitting on our countertop in the kitchen, and he wondered who was taking the products. And that's how he told us about himself, that look, that the product there saved his life. And it was a box of Unimadi. He said that saved his life. And we asked him how. He said he had been a diabetic for over 20 years. He had struggled with some wounds caused by diabetes that were not healing. He almost lost his leg. And somebody introduced him, who happens to be Dr. Dieter. We later found out that it was Dr. Dieter, that's how he got to know the products. And he started taking them, and his A1C dropped from about 12, 13 all the way to 5.6. And he was taking off his medications. So that got my attention because I had done my blood work like a month before that, and I was told that I was pre-borderline diabetic. So I jumped on it. And
Sorry. Sorry. Hey, sorry, I muted the wrong person, so your name showed up. Sorry, you'll have to unmute yourself. I'm sorry, Julius.
Julius, could you unmute yourself?
Yeah, can you unmute yourself? Sorry, I grabbed the wrong person and muted them.
Okay, you guys can hear me now?
Well,
Ernesto, please, could you mute your microphone?
sorry. I'm trying to mute.
Ernesto, please mute.
Sorry, I keep trying to hit Ernesto, and every time I hit it, it goes to yours. I apologize.
No worries. Yeah,
Okay.
so as I was mentioning, the guy's A1C dropped to 5.6, and his doctor took him off his medications for diabetes and some other, his cholesterol is hypertension. So I said I'll listen and then give the product a try, which I did. And the first 2 weeks, I lost 14 pounds. So,
Yeah, it's amazing. So you
yes.
look completely different in such a
Yes.
short period of time. And
Yes.
you know what I love is that then your mother-in-law, who just had knee surgery, couldn't walk
Yes.
up the stairs and was as Claudia described it, bedridden, was not able to get out of bed. And 6 days on the system, she heard about it. You said, give it a try. 6 days on the system, Claudia, she goes to church, but Claudia, your friend, then runs into her in Costco. And she says, wait, I thought you were bedridden. I thought you couldn't walk. How did you get here? How did you get here to Costco? And she said, I drove myself to Costco because she became mobile in 6 days. Sorry, I have you muted. Okay, sorry, Aaron. More time. Okay, there you go.
Yes. Okay. So yes. So my mother-in-law also. I mean, there are many stories like that about the pain. She had the surgery, and she really started her mobility really improved in a very short space of time, and even the pain, her pain was greatly reduced, so she could now go up and down the stairs, which she was struggling with at home. So
It's amazing, incredible. You look totally different. You have some comments of people saying, like, Julius, you look slimmer already. You look like a different person.
thank you. My waistline, my pants, this suit I'm wearing right now, I could not, before I could wear it without a belt, but today I had to look for a belt because it's
That's true. You're gonna need belts. Yeah, Julie, anything else that you want to say about the system? I know you've had a chance to share with so many people and already seen how quickly it impacts lives. For some reason,
okay. Yeah, okay. So as I was saying, it's not just about the weight, because some people that's what they're wondering, but the most testimonies I've gotten out of this, people with diabetes. It's amazing how, I mean, I have a friend in Cameroon who has suffered with diabetes for 23 years. Sorry, there was a call interrupting. Can you hear me?
Yes, very well.
Yes, yes. So a friend in Cameroon struggling with diabetes for over 23 years. I sent him this protocol through Dr. Dida's mother, who's in Bamenda, Cameroon. And after just a few days on this product, the guy was struggling to actually keep his sugar up. So his sugar had dropped so low, he traveled to Nigeria, he almost passed out from low sugar. So he had to look for food and stuff. But he's somebody who has struggled with diabetes. And these were his words. He said, Julius, I'm a pastor for 23 years. What prayers could not answer? You've answered it in less than a week.
Yeah, I love it. It's very exciting, very exciting. So thank you so much for sharing the story and seeing even back in Cameroon, the Steve who's already reversed his diabetes is amazing. Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, Dr. Dieter, I'm going to hand it back over to you to close out and thank everybody for coming and just let people know what the next steps are. We do this presentation again tomorrow evening. If you were here and you thought, boy, I wish that someone I love had a chance to hear this information, I'm going to turn it over.
Yeah. I want to thank you guys very much for sharing your evening with us and listening to this presentation. We're trying to save the lives of as many people as possible. It is our goal for people to have this knowledge. As a doctor, I never had this knowledge until 3 years ago that diseases were reversible. And after learning about that, I've made it my mission for as many people as possible to know. And so we want to first of all thank you for joining us tonight to listen to this. Knowledge is power, and with this information, you could begin taking back control of your health. You could reclaim your health again. If you're suffering from any conditions, let this presentation give you hope that you could take your health back. If you have a brother, a father, a sister, or what have you, as I said, our ancestors never had these conditions 100 years ago. And you could reclaim your health again. That should be hope. And don't sit on it. Take action. You could be healed of your diabetes. You could be healed of your blood pressure, your arthritis, your PCOS, your mental issues, your weight issues. Imagine having to never have to suffer because of your weight again, or never having to take a single medication for diabetes again, and what have you. And we want that hope not to be hope just for you, but hope for everybody you know who has an illness. And so, first thing to do is to take action for your own self. The second thing to do is, to also be a voice for other people who could have heard this, but were not privy to be on this call today. We'll do this call again tomorrow. Invite your friends, invite your family members, invite people who you care about who are struggling, looking for answers that the healthcare system hasn't given them. There is hope. Our ancestors did not have these problems. We could eradicate these problems with the right tools, and that's what this is. Not magic, just biology, a chance to take back your biology. And I want to end by saying this. We are always looking for people to join this team, to join this mission, to take your health back. Now, the statistics in the US is that 90% of people 9 out of 10 people in the US have metabolic dysfunction. 70% of adults in the US are on at least one prescription medication. That statistic is projected to increase by 2050 to 80% of adults. You and I can do something about that. So we're looking for people. You don't have to be a doctor. You don't have to be a pharmacist, a nurse, or what have you. You can just be a regular Joe or a regular Jane, and you can help us by partnering with us to be an influence in your community. And so consider that. If that is something that sounds interesting to you, get with whoever invited you. They can lead you through the next steps to joining our team. We want as many people as possible to join us because we only have a limited amount of influence. As a person, I can only stretch my hand out this far. But if I have two other people stretching their hand that far, all of a sudden my reach is longer. And we want to help as many people take back their health. So consider joining us, consider partnering with us, and take action today for yourself, for your loved ones, to be able to reclaim your health. Thank you so much. Thank you to all the first timers who joined us. And we look forward to seeing you guys again tomorrow with more invitees. We'll be doing this again. Thank you and good night.